Some serious fraud allegations in PMQs this week. Let's have a listen to what happened to the House of Lords yesterday.
It is my deeply held conviction that the current state of affairs is not acceptable. Given that I'm the Minister for Counter-Fraud, it feels somewhat dishonest to stay on in that role if I'm incapable of doing it properly, let alone defending our track record. Indeed, I think any Prime Minister should be able to reasonably expect that the levers of government were actually connected to delivering services for our citizens. I hope that as a virtually unknown minister beyond this place, giving up my career might prompt others more important than me to get behind this and sort it out. It matters for all the obvious reasons, but there is a penny of income tax waiting to be claimed here if we just woke up. Total fraud loss across government is estimated at £29 billion a year. Of course, not all can be stopped, but a combination of arrogance, indolence and ignorance freezes the government machine. Action taken today will give this government a sporting chance of cutting income tax before a likely May 2024 election. If my removal helps that to happen, it would have been worth it.
He just said 29 billion a year going into fraud. Wait till you hear the Prime Minister's response to that in a minute, but it's just absolutely shocking. Here's PMQs.
Did the Prime Minister agree to the Chancellor of the Exchequer writing off £4.3 billion of fraud? That's £154 of every house.
Some of you may be aware that I do know a little bit about body language, and he is showing a lot of stress on his face right now.
Household in the country. That went directly into the pockets of fraudsters.
No, of course not, Mr. Speaker. But what I can tell him, we do not support fraudsters or those who steal from the public purse, Mr. Speaker. But what I can tell her is that everybody in this country should be very proud of the huge effort that was made by Lord Agnew and others to secure ventilators and to secure PPE, and at the time.
What the hell do ventilators have to do with this level of fraud that's going on in government? We already knew this from all the PPE fraud that we heard about. This has got to be one of the most corrupt governments ever. And if that question's correct, and they just wiped off $4 billion and basically said we can't be bothered to go and track that down, how can they work? How can they not be corrupt? But on top of that, what they do to the poor on universal credit. You've got to go in once a week to be checked on universal credit. It's almost like we can't handle this level of fraud at $4 billion. But when it comes to a few hundred or maybe £1,000 a month, yeah, we can handle that. We'll set up an entire department to deal with that across the country.
Captain Hindsight and others were calling for us to go faster, Mr. Speaker.
The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. Does the Prime Minister believe that applies to him?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, of course, but let me tell the House that I think he's inviting a question about an investigation which, as you know, Mr. Speaker, I can't comment, and on which he, as a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, will know that I can't comment on. And what I am focused on is delivering the fastest recovery of any European economy from COVID, the fastest booster rollout, 400,000 more people on the payrolls now than there were before the pandemic began. And we're launching a policy tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. He talks about people being out of work.
Let's face it, he's going to be looking for work shortly.
In my case, that's what I understand why he wants it. We're launching a plan tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, to get 500,000 people off welfare into work. It's a fantastic idea. I hope he supports it.
Keir Starmer.
I think the Prime Minister said yes, he agrees the code does apply to him. Yes. And therefore, if he misled Parliament, he must resign. Yes. On the 1st of December, the Prime Minister told this House, in relation to parties during lockdown, all guidance was followed completely in number 10 from that dispatch box. Yeah. On the 8th of December, looks quizzical, he said it. On the 8th of December, the Prime Minister told this House, I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged there was no party. So since he acknowledges the Ministerial Code applies to him, will he now resign? Yeah.
Mr. Speaker. But you know, since he asks about COVID restrictions, let me just remind the House, and indeed remind the country, that he has been relentlessly opportunistic throughout. He has flip-flopped from one side to the other. He would have kept us in lockdown in the summer, Mr. Speaker. He would have taken us back into lockdown at Christmas, Mr. Speaker. And it's precisely because we didn't listen to Captain Hindsight that we have the fastest growing economy in the G7, Mr. Speaker.
When you look at the G20, you see we're nowhere near the top, with that number 1 spot going to India, 2nd spot Saudi Arabia, and 3rd spot France. We are 12th. Shocking, right? You lied to Parliament again.
And we have got all the big calls right.
The guy that said in hindsight he now appreciates it was a party. We've discovered the real Captain Hindsight, haven't we, Mr. Speaker?
Wearing a party hat.
Let me spell out. They shout now. They're going to have to go out and defend some of this nonsense. Let me spell out the significance of yesterday's developments. Sue Gray referred matter to the police, having found evidence of behaviour that's potentially a criminal offence. Prime Minister, if you do not understand the significance of what happened yesterday, then I really do despair. Because the police, Prime Minister, the police, having got that material from Sue Gray, subject it to a test to decide whether to investigate. And that test was whether it was the most serious and flagrant type of breach in the rules. The police spelt out that what they meant by that those involved knew or ought to have known what they were doing was an offence, and that there was little ambiguity about the absence of any reasonable defence. Does the Prime Minister...
This question will continue, and I will hear the question. Unfortunately, you might not believe this, but our constituents are very interested in both the questions and the answers. If some members do not wish to hear it, please leave quietly. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, having got the material from Sue Gray, the police had to take a decision as to whether what they had before them was the most serious and flagrant types of breach of the rules. If members want to laugh at that, laugh. The police spelt out what they meant. They decided on the material they've already got that those involved knew or ought to have known what they were doing was an offence, and that there was little ambiguity around the absence of any reasonable defence. Does the Prime Minister really not understand the damage his behaviour is doing to our country?
Mr. Speaker, I hope that the right honourable gentleman understands that although the issue that he raises is important, there is simply no way, as he knows, as a lawyer, that I can comment on the investigation that he is currently taking place. But what he also knows, he talks about the most serious issue. He talks about the most serious issue before the public today and before the world today. It's almost as though he was in ignorance of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that we have a crisis on the borders of Ukraine, and I can tell him what is actually.
And let's be clear, his party's been taking large amounts of cash from that dictator who is trying to invade the Ukraine right now. If you'd like to know more about that, check out my film, From Russia with No Love.
What is going on in the cabinet room of this country is that the UK government, no, Mr. Speaker, the UK government is bringing the West together so that we have...
Under Boris's government, we have ticked off so many governments, it's almost impossible to believe that we're bringing them together over this crisis. In fact, we're really mired in this crisis because the money the Conservative Party have been taking from Putin and Putin allies. We've ticked off the EU over fishing rights and the Northern Ireland Protocol. We've therefore also ticked off the American government over the Northern Ireland Protocol, and selling nuclear submarines to the Australians not only ticked off France and therefore the EU, it also ticked off the Chinese.
Led by this government and this Prime Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretary to bring the West together to have the toughest possible package of sanctions.
Oh, I'm so scared.
What he also hasn't announced is the fact that he's refusing to deploy troops. And he's announced that on national TV, which in terms of diplomacy is just backward, awful, and playing into Putin's hands. But should we be shocked if most of their money seems to be coming from Russian oligarchs with deep connections to Putin?
To deter President Putin from what I think would be a reckless and a catastrophic invasion. That is what this government is doing. We're getting on with the job, and I think he needs to raise his game, frankly.
Can I just say honestly, just sit. Can I just say to both sides, our constituent watching it, tensions are running high, and what we need to be able to do is allow the people out there who are bothered about their futures to hear what is said on both sides. So please, let's give the respect our constituents deserve. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this was the Prime Minister who went into hiding for 5 days because of these allegations. Talk to me about being around for the allegations. Mr. Speaker.
Can I just say I don't want to do this, but I am determined to make sure our constituents can hear. The next person that stops me hearing will not be continuing in this debate. Questions?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's continual defences wait for the Sue Gray report. On the 8th of December, he told this House, I will place a copy of the report in the library of the House of Commons. His spokesperson has repeatedly stated that means the full report, not parts of the report, not a summary of the report, not an edited copy. So can the Prime Minister confirm that he will publish the full Sue Gray report as he receives it?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell him is that we've got to leave the report to the independent investigator, as he knows. And of course, when I receive it, I will do exactly what I said. But I can tell him that in the meantime, I think what the people of this country want to hear is what we're doing to tackle the issues that matter to all of us, fixing the cost of living.
Well, first of all, weird, because we're talking about Sue Gray, that he starts bringing this stuff up. And, of course, on top of that, he's got one heck of a job. I mean, the ONS is showing that wages aren't going up anymore, and inflation is, and it will continue to, because we've got blocks at Dover. On top of that, we've got European companies who are not going to be exporting into the UK, and we're, therefore, not going to be importing into the EU. Trade is going to suffer.
Mr. Speaker, helping people across the country by lifting the living wage, Mr. Speaker, by helping people with their fuel costs, Mr. Speaker, as this government is, and by cutting the tax of people on universal credit, cutting the tax by £1,000. And, Mr. Speaker, that party opposite are committed to abolishing universal credit. That's their policy.
This question was about the report from Sue Gray being released in full. And I'll add, there are claims that the report will contain photos of Boris partying.
Keir Starmer.
Cutting the tax! The police say the evidence meets the test. Frankly, the public have made up their minds. They know he's not fit for the job, and that's what really matters here. Throughout this scandal, the Tories have done immense damage to public trust. When the leader of the Scottish Conservatives said the Prime Minister should resign, the leader of the House called him a lightweight. English Conservatives publicly undermining the Union by treating Scotland with utter disdain. How much damage are the Prime Minister and his Cabinet prepared to do to save his skin?
I hope he stays in as long as possible, because this damage is just going to tear the Conservative Party apart. And I'm getting the impression, just an impression, maybe no one really wants to take up the poison chalice right now, and they're happy for Boris to take on all the flack that's going to come from this year's economic turmoil.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that he was offering a yet more general criticism of what's been going on in Downing Street. Let me just remind the House of what's been going on in Downing Street. We've been prioritising the COVID backlogs.
which have been created in part because they followed a policy of herd immunity. They had no plans to deal with the pandemic, and they haven't really funded the NHS in 10 years.
Mr. Speaker, investing massively in 9 million more scans so that people get the treatment that they need and that they've been waiting for, and making sure that we have 44,000 more people in our... Yes, it says it's rubbish. They didn't vote for it, Mr. Speaker. They don't support it. 44,000 more people in our NHS now than there were in 2020.
While it might be true that staffing numbers have gone up, it's not enough. So, for example, our GDP, we spend about 10.2% on the NHS, whereas someone like the United States spends about 16%. And when you look into the real detail, what you seem to find is that, yeah, they might be getting more staff in, but that's at the detriment to actual facilities. So, for example, the number of beds have gone down, and patients waiting for NHS treatment in England has skyrocketed. And frankly, it's been going up and up ever since the Conservatives came into power in 2008.
And we're fixing social care, Mr. Speaker, which governments have neglected for decades, and Labour...
Yeah, a bunch of Conservative governments have caused this. So he's slagging off Labour about Conservative governments, which he was a part of? It's maddening.
Absolutely no. They have no plan at all to fix the NHS or to fix social care. Vote Labour, wait longer.
Waiting times have been going up with the Tories since 2008, ever since they came into power. Let's face it, COVID hasn't helped, but maybe if they'd invested, it wouldn't be so bad. If they'd drawn up plans for a pandemic, if they actually had all the PPE and all the equipment they needed for a pandemic, if they'd set up the facilities to deal with a pandemic, maybe we wouldn't be in the problem.
The reality is that we now have the shameful spectacle of a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom being subject to a police investigation. Unable to lead the country, incapable of doing the right thing, and every day his cabinet fail to speak out, they become more and more complicit. And what's utterly damning, despite the huff and puff, is that this is all happening when petrol prices, the weekly shop and energy bills are going through the roof. 3 months ago, Labour suggested cutting VAT from energy bills. Still, the government has failed to act. Instead of getting on with their jobs, they're wheeled out to save his. Whatever he says in his statement later today or tomorrow won't change the facts. Isn't this a Prime Minister and a government that have shown nothing but contempt for the decency, honesty and respect that define this country?
Prime Minister! No, Mr. Speaker, we love this country and we're doing everything in our power to help this country.
I'd love to run a poll just to see what people actually think. Do they love this country or do they love power?
And of course, he wants me out of the way, Mr. Speaker. Of course, he wants me out of the way. He does, and I can't. And many people, of course, I don't deny it. For all sorts of reasons, many people may want me out of the way. But I tell you, the reason he wants me out of the way is because he knows that this government can be trusted to deliver, and we did, and we delivered on Brexit, Mr. Speaker. He voted 48 times. He voted 48 times to take this country back into the European Union. We delivered. He did. He can't be trusted. We delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, Mr. Speaker, and we will deliver on our plan to unite and level up across the whole of the UK. Crime down 10%, Mr. Speaker. Job vacancies at a record high. Colossal investment in... Yes, Mr. Speaker, we're delivering and they have no plan.
He talks about delivering. We're in a position where we can't get deliveries or send out deliveries to the EU, our neighbours. But on top of that, we've got two problems coming. One in July where further enforcement rules come in, but also in September, which no one is talking about at the moment. In September, the EU are introducing their biometric checks, which are going to involve getting out and putting a hand scan, an eye scan and a facial scan on anyone coming into the EU if they're from a third country. That means all of our lorry drivers. We're about to hear from the CEO of the port, Doug Bannister, talk about this issue, as well as issues relating to Brexit and deliveries.
I'll have to press you, I suppose, on that, on behalf of my viewers and say, is any of it because of Brexit?
Certainly. So the introduction of the full customs checks that came in on the 1st of January, that's by having to undertake that in the port at check-in, that is indeed as a result of Brexit. That additional time to process is indeed as a result of Brexit. I think one of the important things, though, is coming in the future, and that is in September, the European Union is introducing their entry-exit system, which is a set of biometric controls for going through immigration. And in Dover, we operate juxtaposed controls, which means you clear French immigration on our side. If these biometric controls come in as they're designed to do so, which is around an airport operation rather than a busy ferry terminal, we will have significant challenges then.
These biometric checks have been passed through legislation and discussed with the EU since 2016, yet I do not believe we are in a position to be ready for them because nothing's being talked about at the moment. We shall see.
3 times as much tech investment as France in this country, twice as much as Germany. We have a vision for this country as the most prosperous and successful economy in Europe because we are going to unite and level up. The problem with the Labour Party today, Mr. Speaker, is that he's a lawyer, not a leader. That's the truth. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker. We've taken the tough decisions.
I can't hear what the Prime Minister's got to say. No, I would have thought he's the Prime Minister of this side of the House. I'm surprised that this side of the House doesn't want to listen to it, because I do. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I only wanted to add the point that we've taken the tough decisions, we've got the big calls right, and in particular I, am getting on with the job.
Speaker, and can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister on Bloody Sunday? And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you and the entire House will want to commemorate tomorrow the Holocaust Memorial Day, when 6 million Jews lost their lives at the hands of the regime of Hitler. And of course we remember other genocides, not least more recently in Bosnia, and we all pray for continued peace in that country. Mr. Speaker, at the heart of this matter we have a Prime Minister who is being investigated by the police for breaking his own laws. Absolutely unprecedented. A man who demeans the office of Prime Minister. This is the latest in a rap sheet that is already a mile long. Illegally proroguing Parliament, misleading the House, decorating with dodgy cash, partying while the public suffered. Every moment he stays, he's dragging out the agony for families who reminded of the sacrifices they made, and dragging his party further through the dirt. The public knows it, the House knows it, even his own MPs know it. Yeah. When will the Prime Minister cop on and go?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I want to join the right honourable gentleman and echo his sentiments about Holocaust Memorial Day, where I think he is completely right. But I must say that he made the same point last week. He's wrong then, he's wrong now, and much as I enjoy cooperating him, but it is precisely because I enjoy cooperating with him so much and with all his Scottish colleagues that I have absolutely no intention of doing what he suggests.
Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, every moment that the Prime Minister lingers, every nick in this death by 1,000 cuts is sucking attention from the real issues facing the public. Tory cuts, Brexit and the soaring cost of living have pushed millions of families into poverty. The impending national insurance tax hike hangs like a guillotine while they eat cake. This is nothing short of a crisis. And the only route out, the only route to restore public trust is for the Prime Minister to go. How much longer will Tory MPs let this go on for? How much more damage are they willing to do? It is time to get this over with. Show the Prime Minister the door.
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't know who's been eating more cake. What I would say to what I would say to the right honourable gentleman, for whom actually, Mr. Speaker, I have a behind the scenes. People don't get this, but actually we cooperate well, and I want to continue to do so.
I hope you enjoyed my political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.